Welcome back to the deep dive. And Camilla, this one is, it's all for you. We've got your materials right here, the AP guidelines, those critique methods, and yeah, the big one, the feedback on SI4. So our mission today is super focused. We're not just going to, talk about the critique. We're going to try and build an actual roadmap for what comes next.
Yeah.
We want to push your work, your SI5 and SI6, to show some real visual evolution and to really nail that synthesis of materials, process, and ideas.
And these sources are so useful for that. They really explain the why behind that critique you got. When the assessment asks for, skillful synthesis, it's really asking for a perfect link between three things.
Materials, processes, and ideas.
Exactly. And the challenge you're facing right now, it's a classic one, is what happens when those three things just fall out of sync. The work can be technically great, but it becomes conceptually a little confusing. Yeah. And that confusion is what stops them from seeing the evidence of your inquiry.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's do the diagnosis. Your SI question. I mean, it's powerful, right? How can I represent my feelings, emotions during a big change in life?
It's a great question. It implies so much. Tension, struggle.
Transition, yeah. But here's the thing. The feedback, this says the piece right now, SI4, is reading as relaxation or calm, even melancholy.
And that's the disconnect.
That's it right there. The idea is upheaval, but the visual feeling is calm. That's where the synthesis starts to break down.
It is. I mean, someone in the feedback mentioned a velvet feel from the background and the cool colors. That visual texture, the process you used, it's actively communicating comfort.
Right.
So if the idea is turbulence, the visuals have to fight that comfort, not, lean into it.
And the newspaper. That seems to be the biggest sign of this issue. People literally said they were unsure how the use of newspaper has meaning. It's an interesting texture, for sure, but it's a material that doesn't have a clear voice yet.
So the newspaper is a material that hasn't been put through the right process to connect to your idea? Exactly. It becomes decorative instead of essential. And if you look at the suggestions they gave, like adding darker borders or blending with purple or adding shine, those aren't just random tips.
Right, they're instructions.
They're specific instructions on how to change your process so that the material, the newspaper, starts to scream emotional tension instead of just sitting there.
So if SI4 is sort of the before picture, how do we structure the rest of your investigation so that SI5 and SI6 become the after? How do you show that growth?
Well, this is where we have to zoom out and think about the whole sustained investigation. It's 60% of your score.
It's huge.
It's huge. And the whole point is to show that investigation over time. The 15 images you submit have to tell a story of evolution. It's a narrative.
It's not just about fixing the newspaper problem in the next piece.
No. You have to document the process of fixing it. The rubric demands evidence of practice, experimentation, and revision.
This is so important, Camilla. The sequence of your 15 images is everything. You can't just have, 15 finished pieces at the end.
God, no.
So how should you sequence it? If you've got, say, 4 big resolved pieces, how do you use the other 11 images to tell the story of how they were made?
I'd suggest finding a rhythm. After this piece, SI4, maybe your very next image, SI5, shouldn't be a finished piece at all.
It should be process.
It should be process documentation. A photo of you testing that purple blending technique. A close-up sketch of you experimenting with those darker borders. That proves you're listening to the critique.
And then SI6 can be the new resolved piece that came out of that experiment.
Exactly. You're visually showing the cycle of inquiry. And remember, the guidelines actually give you a ton of freedom here. They say even a radical change like going from 2D to a small 3D piece is successful if it's, and this is the key, clearly related to the stated inquiry.
So you can take big risks as long as it's all in service of that emotional question.
Yes. And your written evidence just supports that visual story. You only get 600 characters to describe your development.
Which is nothing.
It's nothing. So you have to be so specific. You can't just say, I explored my feelings. You have to say something like, responding to feedback on SI4, I experimented with harsh blending in SI5 to make the newspaper signify distress, not just texture.
That is so much stronger. It's concrete.
So to make those kinds of smart, specific choices, you need an objective way to look at your own work. And that's where those critique methods from your sources come in. They let you move past I like it or I don't like it into real visual problem solving.
Okay, let's start with formal analysis. This is just the raw elements, right? Line, shape, color, value, texture.
Purely the visuals.
So right now, the cool colors and that velvety feel are creating calm. Formally, how do you break that? How do you create instability.
You have to introduce some kind of dissonance, some contrast. That generic AP feedback packet had that great example putting a bright red circle in a muted painting just to create tension. For your work, maybe that means the blending process needs to leave some really harsh, unblended edges. Or maybe you introduce some sharp, chaotic lines on top of that soft, velvety background.
You create a formal conflict to show the emotional conflict.
Precisely.
But wait, if you add too much harshness, don't you risk losing that melancholic mood that actually is working in the piece right now?
Now that is the real challenge of synthesis, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're aiming for controlled chaos. Maybe don't cover the whole piece in sharp lines. Maybe you just create one hot spot of formal tension while the rest of the piece keeps that introspective, melancholic feel.
I like that. A focused point of tension. Okay, now let's use that same thinking to solve the newspaper problem. Let's talk about semiotic analysis.
The study of signs and symbols.
Exactly. So you've got the signifier, the newspaper itself, and the signified the meaning. And right now, they don't match.
Not at all. A newspaper, the signifier, usually means things like information, current events, history.
Yeah.
It's external.
But your idea, the signified, is about personal, internal, emotional change.
So you have to transform that newspaper so completely that you destroy its original meaning and replace it with your own.
How do you do that?
You could tear it, burn it, obscure the text so heavily with paint that it's unreadable, bury it under layers so it's just a hint of texture. If you do that, the material isn't about information anymore. It becomes a symbol of, say, history being erased or memories being distorted.
Okay.
That is an intentional semiotic transformation. And suddenly, that newspaper isn't a random texture anymore. It's a critical part of your emotional story.
So as you move forward with these ideas, every single element has to be intentional, which brings us to the final requirements, and especially this idea of integrity.
Yes, and this isn't just a box-ticking exercise. It's a conceptual step.
Okay, so you're using collage, you're using newspaper, it's pre-existing material. The AP guidelines are really clear here. You have to give credit.
You have to. You get 100 characters for a short citation. And the reason for that rule is, well, it's profound. It forces you to admit you started with someone else's material.
But just citing it isn't enough.
Not even close. The work has to, and I'm quoting here, extend beyond mere duplication. The real integrity check, the final test for your visual evolution, is whether you can show an observable transformation.
Did you change it enough?
Did you manipulate it, alter it, or destroy it so much that it now offers a completely fresh perspective that is 100% aligned with your question?
You want to make the newspaper so completely yours that the citation is just a footnote.
Exactly. The viewer sees your hand, your process, your ideas as the dominant force.
And that idea of transformation has to show up in your written statements, too. You only get 100 characters for materials and processes on each image.
So be specific. Don't just write paint.
No, right? Oil paint layered heavily with a palette knife. That specificity shows sophistication.
It does.
So, Camila, what does this all mean? What's the next move? It seems like your next piece, SI5, it needs to be a kind of controlled explosion based on this feedback.
I think so. Use those specific suggestions, the blending, the shine, the contrast, as intentional experiments. Document that process and make sure every choice you make is actively fighting that feeling of relaxation and instead communicating the tension of change. And our final thought for you to explore is this. Think about those 15 images like frames in a film. The sequence is the narrative of your growth.
It's your story.
It's your story. So how can you strategically pace the reveals? Maybe show a strong finished piece, then follow it with a close-up detail that shows off your synthesis, then follow that with a process shot that shows you taking a huge risk.
So you're not just showing the destination.
You're showing the entire intentional journey of how your visual voice evolved.
Okay.
How you convince them it didn't just appear, but that you built it piece by piece through intense inquiry.